Namaste and welcome to Pramanik Astrology channel. Today we have with us one of the Vedic astrologer, Vaughn Paul Manley. Welcome Vaughn on Pramanik Astrology channel.
Pleasure to be here. Thanks so much, Prasad.
Yes. So what you are going to enlighten us today with? We have questions around career. So
yes, I think within the topic of career, it's such a vast topic that I think I'd like to first address the attitude of the astrologer and talk about how do we address malefic combinations? How do we work with that? How do we view that? And how do we interpret that so that it is correct as well as helpful for people, whether it's your own chart or other people's chart?
Yes, great.
So, first of all, astrology is meant to be helpful. Why do I say that? Because even in the first chapter of the Prashahora Shastra, the classic text, the Brahmin asks Parashara about, tell us, with this attitude of sincerely inquiring, how do we understand? Give us a detailed explanation of the planets, the houses, and the signs. And this was Parashara's reply. It says, your query has an auspicious purpose in it for the welfare of the universe, So, I mean, there in the tradition, in the most classic book, in the very first line, it points out that the purpose of Jyotish is for our benefit.
Yes.
I mean, but so why do I bring that up first? Because so many times people get confused, they fall into states of fear, and I hear from them. People call me and ask me for a reading to help clarify something they read on the internet or watched on YouTube, read somewhere, talked to some astrologer, and they're in a state of fear and anxiety over it because of what they learned. And so my teacher, K.N. Rao, says, never leave someone in fear, lacking in hope. That it is, let me give you the exact quote, it's the moral duty of a conscientious astrologer not to turn his client into a fatalist. So there's always, we don't want to sap their will by giving this interpretation that sounds fatalistic, because there's always the divine grace. There's always the chance that we could be wrong.
Yes.
Or misunderstand the combination. And there's always the actions that we can take. There are the next positive steps that we can take. So as an astrologer, our purpose needs to be, in my opinion, to give the client the next positive steps that they can take. Why do I say steps? Because that's our karma. I mean, karma is based on our actions. Our actions are based on our thoughts. So we steer people in the best direction, given the challenge they have. And so then the question is, how do you work with malefic combinations? We have around career, we have the 10th house, 10th lord, somehow connected with malefic planets or Dusthana houses. What are the Dusthana houses? That's 6, 8, and 12.
Yes.
So those are also called the trick houses. So the Du means difficult. Sthana means house. So these are, you could say, evil. And in fact, the classic texts don't help because they already call them evil. And here's a quote. If malefics occupy the 10th house and its lord is being associated with or aspected by evil planets and occupy the evil houses 6, 8, or 12, then a Dur yoga is caused. Okay, so we read the classic text or we talk to an astrologer who is using this terminology, and it pushes people into a state of fear around their career. What's going to happen? Everybody wants to know either something about career, money, or their relationships, their marriage.
Right.
These are three important questions. That's the bread and butter of astrology. That's why people go to astrologers typically. So I was once asked by another astrologer who was struggling with this dilemma, which all astrologers face. How do we deal with these combinations that inspire fear in us as astrologers? Right. And certainly, if we have that attitude about it, then how can the clients not have that? Of course, they're going to feel a sense of fear. Fear is not helpful. It's good to be practical. It's good to have to not sugarcoat. We need to do that as astrologers, not whitewash and sugarcoat and make things sound pretty. I like what my colleague Bill Levesey says. We don't want to cheerlead people off of cliffs. That's obviously that's not helpful.
Yes.
So, however, so how did I respond to that question? And I had worked with it. And I have worked with it because I have to. If I'm committed, I'm committed to astrology as a practice, as a counselor, and so I'm certainly faced with this. And then it brought up a moral dilemma for me because I know what my teacher says about not leaving the clients in fear. So I found a quote in the Course in Miracles that says, "All things work together for the good. There are no exceptions except in the ego's judgment. All things work together for the good," that's a radical shift in the playing field, right?
Right.
So, okay, then it's also corroborated in the Bible. It says, all things work together for the good, very similar quote, for those who love God. So if things are ultimately working for our benefit, then that's how we should view this. And I remember when I was at Bharati Vidya Bhavan at K.N. Rao School, and he was giving a class, and he looked very intently in the audience, and he said, "Treat all change as a blessing."
Wow.
Treat all change as a blessing. And isn't that what we're afraid of when it comes to career? We're going to lose our job. We're going to not get that promotion. We're not going to be able to find a job. Any case, so we're faced with a potential change, or in the midst of a change. So, so treat it as a blessing. And so the shift for me was in realizing, okay, we think we're our bodies, but we're really souls who are occupying a body, and we're in this lifetime as a soul. It's all about growth and learning. It's all about growth and learning. So if we have that awareness, what is it that can help us take the next positive steps so we can correct or improve our karma? And that's really the role of the astrologer. And this is how they can be helpful in the midst of these malefic combinations. So how did I answer that question to the astrologer? How do you deal with these malefic combinations? What do you say to people? Like we were talking as like fellow astrologers. How do you deal with this dilemma? And I said, I don't believe it's malefic combinations anymore. That's how I deal with it. Because it's all the Prashara Shastra also says, in the second chapter, it says, the divine has many incarnations. The divine incarnates as the planets to give the results of the karma to the native. So this is the divine working through the planets for our benefit. When we see that, okay, so the other thing that I worked with was how to communicate that, and then things shifted for me. Okay, if we talk about in simplistic terms. This is bad, this is good. It's a simplistic binary approach to astrology. This is good. And that's what people want to hear me say. Like, they'll say, is this dasha going to be good or bad?
Yes, yes.
I mean, you get that a lot, right? Is this transit going to be good or bad? Just get right to it. Come on. So bad is implying fatalistic, right? This becomes an umbrella. I say, okay, this is bad. Then everything that I say that follows is under the umbrella of bad. And there's not much you can do about it. Just sit back, try to enjoy the ride, and chill out. That's not very helpful. Like, it's also not perhaps accurate. And we'll get into some Dur Yoga examples. So you can see that actually, in a modern sense, these so-called Dur Yogas, I mean, I use the word instead of bad, I use challenging. Because people can rise to the occasion. We like challenges. We want to be challenged. We can rise to the challenge, and in a challenge is where we grow. It's the process that's important. Are we growing and learning as souls? And so, I mean, like Paramahansa Yogananda says, an easy life is not a victorious life.
Yes.
And there's an old sailor saying, a smooth sea never makes a skillful sailor. Yeah. So we need that. We need to go up against those challenges, but we see it as a challenge. It's not like we're, I live on Maui, Hawaii, and there's big waves. This is a big wave country, especially at certain times. This is where people come for this big wave surfing, like 30-foot monster waves. And I mean, that's a big force. And you could just feel completely inundated, overwhelmed, and you could drown by that. I mean, there's great force there. Same with the planets. I mean, a planetary combination is not anything to scoff at. I mean, it does have a power. But just like a surfer, we learn to ride the wave. And that's where astrologer helps. As a counseling practice, this is where we help give people the next positive steps. Like another saying is, oaks go strong in contrary winds, and diamonds are made under pressure. So in that sense, when you see that, like, okay, challenge, I'm in. Okay, bring it on.
Yes.
This means I can grow. What doesn't kill us makes us stronger. So when you convey that, okay, we can rise to that and say, okay, I'm ready to get stronger. I'm ready to do some tapasya. I'm ready to do some austerities to shift this karma. And so it's not whitewashing or sugarcoating, not making it all sound good, and it's being realistic.
And
but it's
Dusthana houses test the person most.
Yes, that's correct. Yes, that's correct. But it also challenges the astrologer the most. And here's why. Because we don't want to be inaccurate as astrologers. And in the modern day, you're going to be inaccurate. It's given. It's a given because there's so many professions that are coming out every week. The changes in society are so quick right now. I mean,
there are many complex professions which are very hard to interpret for an astrologer.
Right. We've never been seen before. AI, for instance. Like, how can you see somebody's going to go into robotics?
Yes.
Okay. I mean, this is now the next wave in technology. So then somebody says, well, how am I going to do in robotics? And you're going to be scratching your head. But if you use astrological logic, you can figure things out. You're not going to look in the classic text for them. But how do you, for instance, okay, so the classic texts say Dur Yogas are represented by malefics in the 10th house or with the 10th lord. Rahu is a malefic planet. Mars is a malefic planet, you'll find that Mars and Rahu represents innovation, innovative technology. And that's where the money is. That's where a lot of careers are headed. That's where engineers are going. And, the classic text, so my teacher says, take the classics liberally, not literally.
Wow. Yes.
Liberally, not literally. We have to be creative in our interpretation. We have to be humble and astute, because you'll learn that Rahu is innovation and cutting edge technology, and that represents a huge amount of potential jobs for people and careers, directions. Mars also is an engineer, a fix-it planet. So Mars and Rahu in the 10th house, is that going to be bad or good? Well, yes. It could be good for some things. I mean, 8th house also. 8th house is innovative. 8th house can be innovative because it is against the norm. The Dusthana houses, 8 and 12 especially, 8 and 12 are correspond to the signs Scorpio and Pisces.
8 and 12.
Right?
Yes.
8 signs, 8 houses, 12 houses. So the water signs, and you could say by extension water houses, 8 and 12 are water houses. They're opposite the water houses or water signs. Earth. Earth signs. Water is opposite Earth in astrology. So Taurus is the Earth sign opposite Scorpio. Virgo is opposite Pisces. Scorpio is a water house. So in a modern context, water houses can represent going against the norm. They're different. They are, innovative. On one hand, they're especially the 8th house is innovation, change, being on the cutting edge of change. That's like riding the wave in a let's say an industry. Riding the front wave is the cutting edge, and that's like a surfer on the wave. It's riding that. The 12th house can represent going far away. So what are a lot of combinations that you see? Are engineers, a lot of clients that I have are engineers who study engineering in India, perhaps in the United States, and then so their profession changes to the United States or to another country, a foreign country. So Rahu is foreign countries, 12th house is foreign countries. You see these connections. So then, is that bad?
And
is that bad?
No, not at all.
It's not bad. It's desired, but in the classic text, it's considered evil. Yes. And even in the last century, when Gandhi studied law and went to England, or others left the country before this big wave to leaving India and going to foreign countries. When they came back, they would have to be purified.
Yeah.
That's not too long ago. That's under 100 years ago, and maybe even 50 years ago. These kinds of beliefs were common.
Like for the 12th house in the classical text, you will see that the person will be a wanderer. Who will
wander?
Who will go into the foreign lands and travel?
Yes,
it was like an outcasted kind of thing, but now it is a blessing to explore the world. People travel around the world if they have a stronger 12th house.
And I was really big on research and research to help to steer astrology in for these reasons, to help modernize these classic texts so it's useful. It's not useful in if you take them literally, but only when you take them liberally. So this is helpful as astrologers. It's helpful also as clients to understand this, so you know that it's not just a bad outcome. And when we just limit our terminology to good and bad, we're taking the easy way out.
Yes.
You know, like I don't want to have to work that hard to talk about a texture or a subtlety and nuance where it could represent something much more complex. And that's what our lives are, complex. So astrology is difficult and it takes work. So any questions about this? This is a little bit about what I wanted to share.
Yes.
To have at least an inkling, an awareness that there could be another interpretation which is modern and actually innocuous, harmless. Somebody going to a foreign country used to be considered evil or harmful, or but going to America or going to a foreign country to build a life, to be able to maybe send money back to your parents in India, this is obviously a positive thing and desirable. So
Yes.
we have to reframe, rethink these old, outdated concepts, and
Yes.
be astute and curious about what else it could mean in a modern context, and that's an ongoing thing. The research into how would you see nuclear physicists? Well, that certainly. I mean, how would you understand that? This is not just a physicist, but a nuclear physicist. Okay, so you get into much more refinement, and that's what I mean by texture. How can you see this? And what you see, which is also confusing for astrologers, is that that malefic planets represent science. Kan Rao talks about this, how the malefic planets are science-oriented, the benefic planets are artistic-oriented. And artistic is in a broad sense, meaning not fine art. Obviously, Mercury isn't necessarily a fine artist, but the craft of writing, the craft of public speaking, that is Mercury, you could say. The craft of making a YouTube video, you'll see that people who have a visual sense, they're more oriented towards Venus and the sun.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, because these are some complex, unusual careers.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so engineers could have Mars, Rahu, Saturn in the ascendant, in the sign of Virgo, all the malefics, and they could be amazing, successful engineers. In that case, with Virgo ascendant, Saturn becomes the fifth lord, so it represents what people are interested in studying, and being with malefic planets. And Rahu, cutting edge technology, Mars, a technically oriented fix-it planet. So you can start to flesh these things out as you go through them. Yeah.
So, do you have any examples about
Yes.
the yoga, as in how they interpret and how they work in the...
Yes, sure. Yes, let's look at example or two. Or
yes, that would be great.
So, okay. Can you see this chart?
Yes.
Okay. So this was a client that I recently saw, and she has Aries ascendant with Mars and Rahu in the 10th house.
Yes, in Capricorn.
Yes, in Capricorn. So Mars is the 8th lord. So this is a Dur Yoga by virtue of the fact that it has Mars and Rahu, malefic planets associated, located in the 10th house.
Right.
But this is also the 8th lord in the 10th house.
Yes.
So Mars has a double role as a malefic, being the lord of the most malefic house, the 8th house. Okay, so is this good or bad?
Yeah.
I mean, that's a question. I mean, you look at that, and maybe as an astrologer, you look at that and you go, oh God,
Yes.
this is Mars is retrograde. People have notions about retrograde, what retrograde means, good, bad. You know, they read or they see a video online, so they have conceptions about that. So if
When
you
when I see this, first thing I see is Rahu Mars. Mars is malefic, and it's the eighth lord.
right, yeah,
And that,
yes.
but it is exalted. So how do you look at this?
Yes. So this is not only the eighth lord. This is the first lord. So this says a lot about who this woman is, who she is in her character. She is an ambitious person. Mars in the 10th house, directional strength, and exalted, as you mentioned. And this is also repeating when you read the chart from the moon, because the moon is in the ascendant. If you also look at the degrees over here, you'll see Mars is at 22 degrees. That's very close to his exaltation degree. It's exalted and approaching its exaltation degree. So this is a Ruchika Mahapurusha Yoga, and this repeats from the moon. You could say it also repeats when you read the chart from the sun. This is powerful, certainly. But powerful, is that good? Or is that powerfully malefic, you might ask? If you look at when she began her Mars Dasha. Well, look at the sequence in her life. She started her life in Venus.
Then Sun.
Then Sun, then Moon, then Mars, then Rahu. And that goes all the way till 2014. So just the fact that she went into Mars in 1989, well, she would have been 17 years old, almost 18. She turns 18 in August of 1989. So this is when she's starting her adult life, her career, going to college. Mars is followed by Rahu. So this combination in the 10th house becomes critically important, right?
Dashas are lined up.
The dashas are lined up. And he wants to know about her career, or you try to understand, well, in retrospect, I mean, I saw her a few weeks ago, but now I'm trying to understand. Well, I look at the dasha sequence and see what has she experienced, what has she gone through already, to try to understand what's happening now, because you've got to see what this is. The dasha sequence is a developmental sequence. Everything's building on each other. This is the soul's journey through time, the learning, the growth of the soul through time, as shown by the dashas. So notice how Venus, Sun, Moon, Mars, Rahu, what do you see that's common to all of them?
They are in Kendra. And
yes.
In Chara Rashis, 1, 4, 7, 10.
Yes, very, very good, very good. What planet is common in all of them? Common. Mars is aspecting Venus, the first dasha lord, followed by the Sun, followed by the Moon, and then she goes into Mars, and then she goes into Rahu.
So Rahu Ketu conjunct the dasha lords.
Well, Rahu, Ketu, they're not, only Mars is aspecting all of those dasha lords in sequence: Venus, Sun, Moon, and then of course Mars and Rahu. Rahu does an aspect to the Moon. And in any case, you got to get this combination right.
Yes, it is interesting.
It's Mars is. So you can see me sweating bullets, understanding this, right?
Amazing.
Because
yes,
this isn't only a planet placed in the 10th house exalted. This is her ascendant lord, and it's also the Moon is in Mars's sign, aspect of Mars. So
yes,
I mean, so everything's about Mars. I mean, this is This is a strong woman, first of all.
Yes,
This is a
yes.
very strong woman, and Mars is a planet of will, determination, strength, fortitude. So she's going to make it happen. Whatever it is that she wants in the area of career, she's going to put forth a tremendous amount of will. And that is important to understand. Mars is in a position of strength. And the Dura Yoga, in this sense, is as the eighth lord, this is innovation. This is, and in every business, she's been a businesswoman right out of college. She has not wanted to work for somebody. This is a chart of someone who works for themselves.
Because of 10th house Rahu?
I'm sorry, say again?
Because of 10th house Rahu?
Many
many factors to it, yeah.
No, well, Mars is independent. Mars is a general. Mars likes to give orders, not take them. Mars likes to be in the driver's seat and making the decisions. So a strong Mars will typically represent, broadly speaking, entrepreneurs, people into doing things independently. And the eighth lord also can represent people in a modern context who work when the eighth lord is in the 10th house or 10th lord is in the eighth house. The challenge is to fit into society, because the eighth house is innovative and unconventional, unorthodox, like Rahu. Rahu, you could say, is connected with the eighth house. It's a house of change. So if the eighth house is connected with the 10th house, then it can represent someone who likes to work in an environment of change. They want to work their own hours. They want to take breaks when they want to. They want to stay free of the 9-to-5 schedule.
They will have some morning sessions. They will take break, and they will have evening sessions, like doctors do.
Right. So I mean, this is one interpretation of the eighth lord in the 10th house. There are many interpretations, but Mars is independent. You can bank on that she's not going to want to work for, she's be uncomfortable working for another person or under a corporation, because she wants to do her own thing in her own way, make those decisions. And that's exactly what she described after she conferred, I should say, after I had shared that with her. You've always worked for yourself. And she goes, yes. Mars Dasha went from age 17 to 24, and then Rahu, 24 to 42, 18 years of Rahu. So when she came to me, she has been 5 years into her Jupiter Dasha. Well, you can see that Jupiter began at age 43, 42, and goes to 58. Jupiter Dasha is the first Dasha in our life where that's not aspected by Mars.
But it's in the Mars sign.
It's in Mars sign, yes. And it's in the 8th house. So there's some continuity. It's not entirely different, but she's much more interested in her personal growth, self-development, as is typical with a Jupiter Dasha. People, especially if Jupiter rules if Jupiter is a beneficial ruler of the 9th house, if it's aspecting to the sun or the ascendant, placed in the ascendant, Jupiter is interested in improving, expanding, and doing things in a more you could say Jupiter is a planet of well-being. So she's not willing to work as hard as she did, even though Jupiter is aspected by Saturn. She still wants to work and earn, but she wants to have a more. Wants to be removed more. Jupiter's the 12th lord. Jupiter's the 9th and 12th lord. So she's more interested in her personal growth self. And that's exactly, she wants to be on a board and not be doing the day-to-day management. Mars in the 10th house can represent management.
So
Retrograde
the
planets.
only difficulty in this chart for the Mars 8th lord being into the 10th house is the breaks, you said, right?
You could say the challenge, the challenge is for her to not do it all herself. She wants to do it all herself, and she's burnt herself out. So she wants to be on the cutting edge of change. So she wants to be in control, and that has had a negative effect on her health. So that's why she wants now in the Jupiter Dasha to be focusing more on her health and more having more balance. So this is an Arishta Yoga, Mars aspects as the 8th lord to the ascendant, the moon. So this is a malefic combination. It can have malefic effects. In other words, engaging, she's pushed and pushed, which Mars is known to do, pushed and pushed through all kinds of challenges. And this is good for that, although it has made her she's tired, essentially. Yes. Now in the Jupiter Dasha,
too much work.
Yes, and too much of the day-to-day management. Like it's harder for her to give up control. She wants to be in control. Yeah. And so that's the cutting edge for her now, is to learn how to delegate more. Let a business manager take over a lot of the things that she has done. So in any case, we can see a shift overall in this Jupiter Mahadasha.
Yes.
That's one example. It's not an entirely Dur yoga. Why? Because and that's what we see. You find variations. You'll see a partial yoga being formed. You'll see a yoga fully being formed, and partial or not at all. And in this case, the 10th lord being in the 2nd house, it's not a malefic house. It's aspected by a benefic planet, and the 9th lord, which is Jupiter,
is aspecting the 10th lord.
Exactly. So a Dura Yoga that is a clean, full Dura Yoga would be, and malefics are in the 10th house. The 10th lord is in a Dusthana house and aspected by a malefic planet. So not all the factors, the full factors are there. But partial Dura Yoga certainly has its effects too.
Okay. I have one question regarding the 10th lord. I will ask at the end.
I think we can go to questions now if it's referring to this chart.
Okay. What is the difference between 10th lord being into some other houses versus other planets into the 10th house? Like in this case, 10th lord is into the
second
house. Mm-hmm. But 8th lord is into the 10th house. Okay. So how do we look at these things?
Okay. So the general principle is that we have to keep our eye on 3 things. The house lord, and the karaka. House lord, karaka. It should be a song in all astrologers' head. House lord, karaka. Because those are the 3 things. Those are the 3 criteria that we're looking at. In this case, the house has Mars and Rahu. It also has the 8th lord. The house, the lord, is in a benefic sign, a very comfortable sign. Saturn loves being in earth signs, and also it loves being in Venus's sign. Okay, so Saturn is very comfortable in Venus's other sign of Taurus. other than Libra, its exalted sign. And its aspect of body benefic. So the house lord is in better shape, and you could say better shape, is representing 10th lord in the second house, especially Saturn, can certainly mean earning is important with regards to career. Earning is important in general when Saturn is in the second house. That's a big, wherever Saturn's placed, shows where we have to work, and what our focus of, where a great deal of our focus needs to be in our lifetime. And in any case, so Saturn in the second house is very hardworking for the sake of earning, and security, financial security is very, very important to that person. So then the Karaka, there's 4 Karakas to the 10th house, so it's very complicated. I like to focus first on the sun. The 4 Karakas are the sun, Jupiter, Saturn, and Mercury. Sun is the primary Karaka, so I focus on that first. Sun also gets directional strength in the 10th house. Sun represents our public life in general, so it has inherently more connection to do with the 10th house as a general Karaka. So the sun also is aspected by the 8th lord and on the Rahu Ketu axis. So that is, you could say, qualifies for Adura Yoga. So then, how do we interpret that? It is not an either-or situation. It's both end. It's both end. And that's, we have to blend it, and that's the synthesis. That's a difficult synthesis.
Yes.
Okay. So how can we do that in this case?
You can give the principle in one line.
Yeah, that's the idea. That is a blending. So we say something about Saturn in the second house as a 10th lord, or have that awareness when we're interpreting.
So the energy of the 10th house is going into the second house, and it is going and it is bringing the element of that Saturn. It can be Mercury, it can be Sun, it can be 10th lord, can be anything. In our case, it's Saturn. So
that's correct.
Those planets who bring in their element to the second house of earnings and the Taurus sign.
It says something about our character. Everything sense, a value, a character trait, and that can be described as such. And then when that planet's dasha is running, that gets emphasized more. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So she's security minded. That would be one key word that I would say. Saturn as the 10th lord in the second house. Security minded. She's going to work hard to stay ahead of the game, accumulate wealth through her work. She's not going to be someone who would be only interested in volunteer work, for instance, with that combination, especially also as the 11th lord. 11th lord in the second house. So she's going to accumulate wealth. And that's, I would say the other challenge to this, it's not all rosy. Mars and Rahu, people can suffer a lot by excess passion, excess desire. Like no matter how much she accomplished, she always wants more. Especially if Mars and Rahu, especially when they're together, it's excessive. Rahu makes things more, whatever planets it's with, makes it more excessive, extreme. And so you could say this is excessive ambition. I mean, this is someone who is determined above all to achieve. And that has worked against her health. She'll put career above her own health, and that's been part of the challenge, the difficulty. Right. Yeah.
So, do you have any other examples to share or discuss?
Yeah. Okay. Someone I spoke with yesterday. Okay. This is another Dura Yoga. 10th Lord, you can see. So this person was born April 18th, 1951, 4:54 p.m. in Toledo, Ohio. Virgo ascendant. 10th Lord in the 8th house, with the 8th Lord and the Sun. So we're seeing the 10th Lord and 1st Lord connected with the 8th Lord and the 12th Lord.
Yes.
And in the sign, the sign of Aries.
And are retrograde. And combustion.
Yes, and Mercury's retrograde. So this is both the house lord, the 10th Lord, placed in the 8th house. This is also the Karaka, the primary Karaka, the Sun, in the 8th house, with the 8th Lord, Mars.
Yes.
So, what would you say about this? Let me say, how do I look at it? Okay, this is again. Notice how the 1st Lord is in the previous example and in this example. There's a connection with the 1st Lord and the 10th house or 10th Lord.
Yes.
Right. So in this case, Mercury is the 10th Lord. Yes, it's also the 1st Lord. In the previous example, Mars is the 1st Lord, but it's also in the 10th house. So, so you could say whatever combinations are there are very personal. They comprise a lot of his character traits. So then we're seeing also a strong Mars. Mars is in its own sign, and the sign of Aries. So is this bad? Is being independent bad? If
due to Aries?
Or, Mars is independent.
Yes.
By nature, Mars and the sign of Aries is also, you could say, independent. Mars is sign. Mars is cardinal or Chara sign, right? So this is Mars in its Mula Trikona sign. Sun also exalted.
Yes.
This is also an example of someone who has preferred to work his own hours, work project-based.
Okay, 10th Lord into the 8th house of the bricks.
Yes. So like he was a consultant. He would work evenings, weekends. He would not just the regular 9 to 5.
He was working on his own projects.
Yes. Yes.
And all this is happening 11th from the 10th house. 8th house is 11th from the 10th house.
Yes. So first of all, independent, someone who so you one of the questions you asked, how do you see a difference between somebody who works for a corporation or a job or business?
Yes.
Aries is an entrepreneurial sign. Mars is an entrepreneurial planet. It can also represent management, being in a position of control. If they're working for a business, then they preferred to manage a department or a project or be the lead. So a position of power, so of strength, especially with Mars, with the Sun, exalted. This is excessive heat. This is a fiery constitution, and someone who can, who's very confident. Okay. Right. And
what about his dasha sequence? What is his dasha sequence?
Yeah. So he was in a Mars. He was in a Mars dasha between 68 and 75. So K.N. Rao had indicated to me, pay great attention to the first dasha in a person's life, and also the dasha that's running when someone is becoming an adult, those important formative years. So we have our birth, which is our formative years, our formative childhood years, but then we have our formative adult years, our formative career years, you might say. And that's early 20s. People are making decisions about what career they want to go towards. And so this is, Jupiter is very strong in his chart, and the fifth lord is also very strong. So
Yes.
we can't decide or interpret one's career solely on the position of the 10th lord or the condition of the 10th house, what planets are placed there, or the D10 chart, which I also have up here. So we have to see the chart as a whole. Jupiter's in a Hamsa Mahapurusha Yoga.
Yes.
So he became a counselor. And the 8th house relates to psychology. He's also very interested in writing, literature. Mars is the 3rd lord with Mercury. Mercury's is the Senate lord, so he's a writer. He's a teacher. He's a counselor. He's an astrologer.
Oh.
Yeah. So this is the chart of Mark Boney, a dear friend of mine, colleague, and someone I've also learned a lot from over the years. Both a fellow student of K.N. Rao. And in any case, I was talking with him yesterday. Here is he and I have talked about his chart a lot, and I've used his chart as an example of a popular article I have on my website, Gifts of the 8th House. In any case, he helped professionals in career counseling. He was a headhunter before he was teaching astrology and working as an astrologer full time. He worked in corporate. He worked with powerful business people going through career changes or business transitions. So he'd worked with rajas, the kings of sun is exalted. So 10th lord is with exalted sun in the 8th house, and he was assisting them through transitions, either finding another position as a headhunter, or counseling them with regards to their businesses. So helping them. 8th house is a house of death and rebirth. So it's a house of transition. Is that a bad thing? I mean, you'll see people, 10th lord in the 8th house. If there are combinations that represent counseling, they can help people help people through business leadership decisions. How do I take this business in a dilapidated state, in a broken down state, and how do I revive it? How do we take this to the next level? So he did that kind of counseling. So that, how do you take something in a state of death into a state of rebirth? When it's a business, that means like a business transformation. So this is part of the work that he did. In addition,
this is because 10th lord connected with the 8th house of birth and death and rebirth.
Well, it's a double signification, because this isn't only the 10th lord in the 8th house. This is the 10th lord with the 8th lord. And we're seeing the 10th lord with the 12th lord. So these are houses of transition. 8th and 12th houses are the houses that are, as Hart Defoe, another teacher I had early on when I was studying astrology, used to say that the 8th and 12th houses are both houses of transition. They represent the place in the sky of the sunrise and sunset.
Yes.
So they represent transition, moving from night to day to night. So, so there's we're seeing a repeated pattern, and that's really what we need to do as astrologers, is to find those clues and add them up. Astrologers are really detectives. We're looking at the symbolic language here of the chart, and we're trying to decipher it. We have to add up clues and make our build our case.
Right.
By the number of clues, by the quality of the clues, and then we make our interpretations. So it's analysis and synthesis.
Yes.
So that's a repeated pattern, meaning it's a well reinforced combination with the 10th Lord in the 8th house combining with the 8th Lord and the 12th Lord. That's a lot of transition, and it also, the 8th house represents astrology, because the 8th house, another way to understand the 8th house is that it represents, well, in the 12th house there are watery houses, right? So it's like it's like scuba diving. You're going beneath the surface into the depths, finding the pearls of occult hidden knowledge. So the 8th house is it's very important to the study of astrology. I remember when I first arrived in India in November 1992, and I did tutorial lessons with R. Santanam, who's the first astrologer in India that I worked with, and he was looking at my chart, and he said, "Oh, you started astrology in the subdasha of your 8th Lord," which and he goes, "I also started my study of astrology in the dasha of the 8th Lord."
Wow.
It's when people get into occult knowledge. So it's very innocuous. It's not a harmful interpretation. It's not in and of itself a dangerous or or evil combination. It's not a bad thing. It's just a thing.
Yes. And it has its meaning.
And it's neutral.
Yes.
It's neutral. So, I mean, study of astrology is not an evil thing. It's a neutral thing. It's just something it's another form of research. The 8th house also relates to research. It's a study, a deep study that represents profound knowledge, helping us understand the core patterns. So another way to interpret a Dura Yoga just another viewpoint. We're seeing other viewpoints to help to broaden our perspective, so we can start to develop an understanding of modern interpretations of these ancient classical texts, which need to be updated.
Yes.
That are in our modern culture is requiring that we update it, because or else it's not useful. We need astrology to be useful. It's a great tool for helping people navigate through their lives. It's a map for navigating through time, just like we use maps to navigate through space. To find where we are, we can look at the chart and see where we are and what are the planetary influences coming in. So then we can find the next positive steps. I remember I had was in a counseling program in high school called peer counseling. We were counseling with underclassmen or lower classmen. So, the teacher that I had, she said, "You don't have to give somebody a whole bouquet. You don't have to give this. Just give them one flower. Give them one or two. Give them something that is going to be helpful for them to understand where to take a positive step, how they can move their life forward, move their karma forward." So we all have to manage our karma. So our karmic load is our lifetime. So how can we improve this? So that's really the that's really how astrology becomes a way that we can be of benefit and provide benefit in society. Why it's a great counseling tool. Because you can't go to a counselor and find about the future. You might be able to understand the past, but a counselor, it's the occult sciences that are going to give that and to be able to see the continuum of someone's life through the dasha sequence and the transits, combined with transits, and particularly if you're using multiple dasha systems.
Right.
And it becomes very sophisticated and very refined, and it can be very, very accurate, very, very helpful. And that's the purpose. If it's not helpful, why do it? If it's not benefiting people, why do it?
Yes.
If you're just leading people down a road that is creating more fear and basically paralyzing people into action, we need to feel they need more help than that. And astrology can provide it. So this is a great tool, but we need to use the tool just like with any tool. We have to learn how to use it. Okay. So I don't know.
Do we have a time for an example? Or
Another example? Another example?
12th Lord. I would love to know either a 12th Lord or 10th Lord associated with the 12th Lord, or 12th house, I mean, or a debilitated 10th Lord or something. If you have any example handy.
Just happened to. Okay. All right. So this is similar. So this is a chart of a man who did very well abroad, and you can see how the 10th Lord is again with the 12th Lord, just like in the previous example. Okay, and the 10th Lord is with Rahu. So Rahu represents foreigners, foreign places. And then also with Mars, the 8th Lord. So again, we're seeing some similar patterns here.
Rahu Mars is with the 12th Lord and the 10th Lord. Yes.
Yes. So in his Venus dasha, actually, Venus being in the 10th house, the 12th house, Venus being in the 12th house, Venus took him abroad. And if you looking for confluence, if we're looking for that repeated pattern, we can see in the D10 chart how Venus is in the 12th house. So you could say there's in his natal chart, there was the capacity or the possibility of him to go abroad. First Lord, 10th Lord, with the 12th Lord and Rahu.
First Lord is with the 10th Lord and Rahu and Mars.
Yes, and he started his life in Mercury dasha.
So for foreign settlement, settlement or going for work, there has to be connection between the 12th Lord and the 10th house, right? Because I get a lot of questions about the whether I would be able to go abroad for work, not for education.
Well, I think it's fair to say there could be those combinations.
Yes.
Because this is why astrology is tricky, why it's difficult, because there's always exceptions.
Right.
And here's one exception. He began his life in Mercury dasha, but he had exposure to foreign countries early on, but he didn't go abroad until his Venus dasha. So he's in Mercury, followed by Ketu, and then Venus. So at age 19, he started Venus dasha. 19 to 39 was Venus dasha. So it didn't happen in Mercury or Ketu, although he's always had an interest in going abroad. It actually happened in Venus. So does Venus connected with the 10th house? No. It's in the 12th. It's in the 12th house. It's also in the 12th house in the D10 chart. So he started his own business in a foreign country. Yeah.
During the Venus month.
That's right. Yes. So generally, when people can just go into a Rahu dasha and have more connection with foreigners and more possibility of going abroad. Just simply being in a Rahu Mahadasha or Antardasha, Bhukti. So Rahu primarily is the planet. If you're gonna pin one planet to going abroad with a purpose of career growth, expansion, it's Rahu. That's my experience. I have dozens and hundreds of examples because I talk with so many Indians who have gone abroad. And Ketu, also possibly, yes, Rahu and Ketu can both represent exotic, faraway exotic places. 12th house connections. And if there's a connection with the 5th house or 9th house, then they go abroad for study, typically. Or the connection with Jupiter, the 9th house Karaka or 5th house Karaka, and 5th house Karaka. So you'll see examples of that. If we had more time, we could do that. But in any case, if going abroad for work, in this case, Venus is the second lord in the 12th house in his natal chart. Venus is also yes. So it rules 2 houses of wealth. So wealth abroad, certainly indicated. And then if you Venus is also in the 2nd house from the moon. So Venus is it's the 11th lord in the 2nd house from the moon, 2nd lord, 9th lord in the 12th house. So there's a connection with earning. So Venus was an entrepreneurial dasha, or is an entrepreneur.
I have one question. If Rahu has connection with the 7th lord or 7th house, do these people travel with their partner to the foreign land?
Even just being in the 7th house can connect people with going abroad. The 7th and 12th house can both represent abroad. There's 2 houses for going abroad, the 7th and the 12th. You'll see the 12th house more often than the 7th house in my experience. And yes, there's a connection with 7th house, 7th lord, or Venus, the Karaka, house lord, and Karaka, again, connected in that combination. Yes, then certainly. Yeah, and also, of course, in this class, we haven't gone into divisional charts, but you'll also see all this playing out as in the divisional charts. If the birth time is correct, then you should see repeated patterns, and that's why the divisional charts are so important for accurate predictions. Can't do everything in one class, but
yes,
divisional charts.
It's vast,
and especially looking at multiple charts.
And looking at the planets in all the division charts and connecting them with the Vimshottari Mahadasha.
Well, at least the relevant ones that you're looking at. I mean, relative to people's questions. But I think it's certainly good to know where the Mahadasha Lord.
Yes, this really makes sense how these Vimshottari Mahadasha Lords and planets are lined up to give this person the foreign settlement with Venus and all these planets connected with the 12th Lord, 12th from the moon in the 10th house.
Yes.
Amazing.
Yes.
Okay, so I have a couple more questions. Can we cover this? Or
I think if they're brief, but I think
okay. Just a quick question. Can you tell us a couple of points about Karakamsha? Because I get a lot of questions about it. I know that's a Jaimini concept, and that is.
I think we should save it. I think we should save that one because that's mixing. We're primarily focusing
that will confuse.
That could confuse easily.
Okay, so let's keep this for the D1 chart.
sticking with Parashari at this
Okay,
point.
great. Yeah,
Parashari methods rather than Jaimini methods.
yes.
Because
That
it
will again
gets,
confuse the aspects and
yeah,
things will change, right?
yes,
Okay.
exactly. So I think it would do a disservice maybe to
Okay.
jump into
So
that's a problem with a big problem with how internet astrology has muddied the water, as you might say.
yes,
It's like everything is.
right.
I think you have to learn. You have to really get a foundation in the fundamentals, and and the fundamentals are the main drivers of an accurate prediction. You have that, then you have a great foundation. That's the place to begin.
Yes,
I mean, not that Jaimini is not important. I don't think you have
yes.
to put it off.
No, I
But I
totally.
think, but I think there's. I mean, we all have a point where a different point where we hit the wall and we have analysis paralysis. It's too
Yes,
much.
yes.
So
Okay.
that's a trick to balance. But any
Yes.
other quick question?
No, I have.
Okay, here I
Yeah.
have one thing. One thing that is important to note is that retrograde.
Hmm.
Retrograde also is maligned as a very malefic combination, and it is. Cantor has a great keyword for this. Malefic. I mean, retrograde planets are erratic.
Okay.
Erratic. I love that keyword because it really it's shifting. So just like Rahu and Ketu are amorphous, they they are squirrely or tricky to interpret. They're erratic in their results. They can give changeable, erratic results, and same with retrograde planets. And in fact, Rahu and Ketu, of course, are always retrograde,
Oh yes.
and retrograde planets act like the nodes of the moon. On that note, okay, so they can be also represent going against the grade of society. It's an unconventional indication. For instance, Mercury retrograde is often seen in the chart of astrologers. I got that. A
Yes.
lot of astrologers have that. So they're interested in studying what is unconventional and occult or hidden. And is that a bad thing? No, again, this is just a thing. It's a neutral thing. It's just a proclivity. It's just an interest. And so retrograde, also, if you understand from an astronomical perspective what retrograde means that the planet is appearing to go retrograde. It's not actually retrograde. And it's closer to the Earth. And that's why it appears going in retrograde motion. It's closer to the Earth, and therefore it's brighter. So we're looking at planets that are visibly larger and brighter and slower. So
More effective.
yes, but they can be more effective in an erratic manner. So you can't count on, say, normally one thing that Can Rao says is, benefics and angles are great. They help to solidify the chart in a benefic way. It gives overall protection and well-being. Although if the benefics are retrograde, then less so. Can't count on them for that same benefit. So, so again, retrograde can be more powerful because they're brighter and they're closer to the Earth and they're slower. They represent an area like Rahu that we need to pay attention to in this lifetime. It can represent some pattern from a past life. This is what I remember. I can remember almost everything I learned from R. Sentinam when I first had the days with him. He shared with me how retrograde represents something unfinished business from a past life. So that could be good. You could just come in with a strong desire to do something. It doesn't have to be something that you're working out a challenging area, it certainly can represent that, like Rahu can. So I hope this has been helpful in terms of giving some
Yes.
other perspectives, so that we don't just fall into the trap of thinking good and bad.
Yes.
And to start to see this as more complex or more nuanced, more texture to an interpretation, so we understand our lives as they are, which are sophisticated and complex. To also respect the system of astrology as something that can provide that kind of detailed sophistication. And I think this is, how it can be maybe disservice to be thinking in terms of this binary good and bad. It limits the depth. It's kind of like taking a tool and using it in a way that it's like taking a blunt tool, a very blunt, dull tool, and trying to do something with it. It's so. So also it can help with this kind of understanding. Then we can see our lives in and the study of astrology in a truer sense. And my belief is this is really about our learning and growth as souls. This is our karma, and that way it's all good. We're all learning something. And even in a practical sense, people said, oh God, I hated losing that job, but it's been the best thing. Now I'm doing this. Or, what was, I remember many years ago, it was, I really, really wanted to get that house, and it didn't come through. It had all these features that I liked, and in any case, it didn't come through. And then something else came. What was better, much better. So treat all change as a blessing, is what I would say, and all this is for our benefit and learning. So thank you so much, Prasad.
Yes.
A joy and pleasure. And
yes. Thank you for sharing your knowledge with us and enlightening us with good and bad, and how to judge the career and 10th house things, and the Tur yogas and how to interpret them.
Yes.
Looking forward to, yes. You're saying
the word challenging, to think of it as a challenge.
Yes.
Like, if we can convey something realistic as an astrologer, like this looks very challenging, like you really need to commit to this. And sometimes I have to say that to people, with regards to health, like this is a big hurdle, and it's going to require diligent, regular regimens to improve your health and get on the other side of this. So I think when we see it as there's something they can do to improve their condition, their lives, and give
that's
them
why they seek the advice
so.
of the astrology.
Yes, that's right. Yes.
Thank you for coming to the channel and helping us understand these complexities of the 8th house and 10th house and 10th lord. Thank you.
The way that you reach people by your affect, I really appreciate. Your heart. You bring the heart into your work, and as well as a very sharp mind. I appreciate that.
Yes. Thank you.
Yes.
See you.
Okay. Hariom. Namaste.